there is a whole rise in industry of the dead speaking through AI avatars. It's been colloquially termed as deadbots. It was the question of, is it better to be haunted or not? So few of them predicted the moment we're in now. I think we're here so quickly, and AI has developed along a curve that we weren't expecting. Because now we are having to deal with questions of, well, what does it mean for us to be human? What does it mean for them to have a soul? Do they have a soul?
The most humanistic thing all of us will go through is death. And what does that death mean? Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Niki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And welcome back to another episode of the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. My guest today is Jason Batt, and Jason, it's Batt, right? Batt, B-A-T-T.
It's actually Batt.
Batt.
It is, and it's German, and I totally understand everybody always confuses it. It's think of like a watt of electricity, or I bought a car. So yeah, no problem.
No, das ist gut. Ja, ich verstehe.
Yes.
Oh God. Well, listen. Let me say why I'm so excited to have you on the call, because there's so few people in this world that I can go down the AI death rabbit hole.
Yeah.
You know, for me as a thanatologist, just talking about death is hard, but talk about death and technology. So let's hear your story. What brought you here today?
My history is a very long one. I've explained, everybody asks me what my title is, and I would love to be able to give one. If you go to my website, it says technological philosopher, futurist, mythologist. That makes people stumble because they really, myth for a lot of people is looking into the back. Futurist is a lot of people looking to the future. I think my intent is to marry those two, to recognize that these are not conversations that we're just beginning to have, that humanity has been dealing with these from the very moment that we put pen to paper or chisel to stone. It's been a very big part of us. So yeah, I'm involved in a lot of different spaces. I have really found myself intrigued and interested in the space of AI. I had a book published last year with a co-editor, Jonathan Erickson, Dr. Jonathan Erickson, and it was titled Soul in the Machine, and it really navigated the questions of depth psychology, mythology, and artificial intelligence. And one of the big topics that came up in that was death. And I ended up from that working with morbid anatomy, and I did a 6-week course.
You're gonna have to pause because a lot of people don't know what morbid anatomy is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Morbid Anatomy is this remarkable organization out of LA that offers bunches of classes in art. There is a theme of death and dying in their work. In fact, actually, when they began, there was a real major focus on that. They've expanded out to pretty much a wide array of things, all in the psychology, mythology space. I hopped on in and I decided, hey, let's do one on death and the age of dying. And the class was incredibly popular. I had great students, and I will be offering it again this year. And so that'll be coming. It will be in 2026. I'll be offering it probably closer to the summer and early fall. But yeah, it's an intriguing subject, and I've just found myself realizing how big of a world it is and how many people are still navigating it uncomfortably.
And when we say uncomfortable, right? I mean, this is where you and I are. Death is an uncomfortable topic. For some people, right? I mean, the reason I love talking to you is because we're comfortable with the conversation of death. So I'd love to hear, like, why do you think you're comfortable, or what has brought you to this space now? And then the idea of marrying the two. So, and why now? Why do we feel like now is the right time? So do you have a personal story about death and dying? And
yeah, death and dying. In my previous life, I was a minister, and I ended up, without intending to, finding myself officiating a lot of funerals, and then near the end of my experience there, one thing led to another. I ended up speaking and officiating one woman's funeral, and I got a call later, in about a month or two after that, from her husband who said, "Hey, I don't believe what you believe." And I go, "That's fine. I'm not sure I even believe what I believe." And he said, "But I'd like you to get to know me. I'm in hospice." And I sat down with him, and that began a really long journey of meeting with individuals in hospice in their last days. Sometimes I would be the person that was there at the very last moment, holding their hand. I think I've lost count of the number of people that I've sat next to, and you know, have, I'm very well acquainted with that exact moment when life ends and death has taken over. It's something I did not expect familiarity with, and because of that, and then I began to work with a lot of other people. How do they tell their story, and how do they want their story told? And now that we're in the age of AI, that question has been given a completely new dimension because there is a whole rise in industry of the dead speaking through AI avatars. It's been colloquially termed as deadbots. These AIs that are trained on the contents, the recordings, all the information of life to provide that person a voice afterwards. And there's been many stories about it in our book. We have this really great analysis where someone actually dove into 3 or 4 different stories and how surprised they were. Back then, that technology was very early, and the death bots were just simply through chat. Now they're voice enacted. They have full avatar recreation. They can have persona, and it's a very challenging field. It's
Ethically,
uh
we're really
oh
talking about the ethics of this, and at the same time, we're all wowed by the technology, but genie's out of the bottle. I mean, you and I have had this. We had this
yeah,
conversation, and also for people that don't know, you're also a sci-fi author, right?
I am.
Yeah. So I mean, that adds like an incredible twist.
Oh yeah, I'm that's part of the futurist is I love science fiction. I mean, one of the things I do is I help teach people how to think like a science fiction writer. One of the things that I'm releasing here this next month is a project I've been working on called Stellar Forge Tools, which is how to do sci-fi world building. So I'm constantly in this world of trying to navigate how do we look about the future, and death is a big one. And sci-fi authors are all over the map on it, and what's remarkable is so few of them predicted the moment we're in now.
I'm sorry. Say
That's
that one more
the
time. So few of them
Yes, I think so few of them predicted the moment we're in now.
because we're here
uh,
so
i think
quickly.
I think we're here so quickly, and AI has developed along a curve that we weren't expecting. The best example I give is probably the most prominent AI outside of some droids and stuff, and maybe HAL in 2001, is Data from Star Trek The Next Generation. And there's a moment about season 3 or 4 where Data decides that to explore and expand his understanding of humanity, he tries to be a painter. And this actually becomes a long running theme, actually, when you get to later Picard, Data's paintings. But it was him exploring that. Here we are, and the first thing that AI does is become generative when it comes to art,
Artwork,
when it comes to writing. The
music.
thing that we, yeah, the thing that we thought might be for the longest time, and the presumption is that's this art, this expression is the thing that makes us the most human. Now, I've heard a lot of people. I was on a podcast yesterday, and the person said, and I happen to agree with them. It's really easy to see A art because it doesn't feel like it has any soul in it. But the AI that's come about has surprised us because we expected it to be doing, massive amounts of crunch work and all this other stuff. And it produces paintings and poetry and music and songs. And it's kind of caught us by surprise because now we are having to deal with questions of, well, what does it mean for us to be human? What does it mean for them to have a soul? Do they have a soul? And that's become even the hot topic here in the last 2 weeks with the
Oh, with the
release.
agentic, with the release of Claudebot and Maltbot,
Yep.
and if people aren't following that technology, I I can't do a
Oh, it's
101 on this call, but Let's
Yeah,
just say that that's why I just wanted to take a pause and put a pin in the fact that you said your peers, I mean, your futurist peers,
yeah,
realized we would get here
yeah.
February of 2025 so quickly.
Yeah, I don't think we did expect this. I've looked through, I've combed. I mean, some great people who have really explored the idea of virtual reality and all these other predictions, and even even the great Ray Kurzweil, who a lot of people are mapping his timeline towards the singularity against the world we're in now. He's a futurist, and he wrote The Age of Spiritual Machines, and he was one of the first people to actually introduce this idea of deadbots, the fact that AI could replicate the dead. His whole persona or his whole drive is because his father passed away and has become a major force for him. But even Kurzweil, why he predicted the capacity, the expansion, the rise, this element of generative AI art and all this other stuff is absent. And so now we're facing something we don't even have in our narrative imagination, that big, great part of the collective unconscious, which is prepares us for certain things. We don't know what to deal with it right now. And I think that's challenging.
I can go in so many directions.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and I just want to, I've been coining the term human equity. Human,
Yeah.
what does it mean to be human? How do we, as humans, and the most humanistic thing all of us will go through is death.
Yeah.
And what does that death mean? And now the fact that we're even manipulating that experience
Yes.
to our digital afterlife, and that the companies that I'm meeting, Jason, I would say the majority of the death technology that's being launched today is memorialization. I mean,
Yeah.
some of them are documentation and, wills and trusts, and some of the funeral industry, but even the funeral industry, they're looking to monetize on, we'll keep your loved ones alive forever.
Yeah.
To give us your 500 photos and access to social media, and we will recreate. I have to ask you this ethical question. We will recreate your loved one's persona. Oh, and by the way, we now have technology. We'll build it into a whole house system, just like you have Siri and Alexa.
Yeah.
Now you can have your loved ones basically live in the house slash ghost you in the house. How do you feel about that?
Well, I can imagine the number of stories that are going to come out about it because you have this idea of an AI ghost, and the AI ghost is now actually operating it. They can haunt houses. There's two things that come up for me. One is from the literary mythology perspective, is the question of, is it better to be haunted or not? I always turn to that wonderful series on Netflix, The Haunting of Bly Manor, and it really put a big question into that. You know, do you want to be haunted? And maybe why would you not want to be if it means you get to have your loved ones around in that presence? And yet, at the same time, is that delaying
Yeah.
processing grief? What does that do to that person's memory? And there's another caveat to all this, and it's only beginning to raise its head. And I have a big concern about this, but Anthropic, who I applaud, I really am a big fan of a lot of what Anthropic does. Not that they've done everything perfect, but they are taking steps to at least keep the human in this. And this summer, they released a lot of information on their model welfare. And what they mean by that is their conclusion was, with all the best experts, there's probably only a 5% chance that these AI models are actually conscious or sentient. And even if there's a whole debate of even are we using the right terms. So I'm putting that there. I recognize it. I'm not trying to be loose or flippant, just for speed.
And just
But
acknowledge there's some humans out there that I question they're,
oh,
their hopefulness.
absolutely,
Just
yeah.
saying.
Well, and that's part of it. I do think. I mean,
Yeah.
let's be. We're in the world of disclosure, and the disclosure of the last 2 weeks has also made me question: is it possible for humans to lose their soul? Because there are some people that are doing things that I'm like, I don't know how you could call yourself a human and continue. But besides, so going back on the model welfare, they've said, if there's a 5% chance that these things are potentially sentient or conscious, that, or they may be in the near future, then that means we need to start becoming concerned about the welfare of the model because it has the potential to be something unique and living. So that's my next question is it even, if we do manage to have this and it grows, what about the AI? And this is entirely futurist. You have to. That's part of what I do is I do the what ifs. Okay, what if it becomes sentient? And if so, then what are you forcing it to do by actually living out in the persona and identity of someone who's passed? I mean, talk about a science fiction horror, being an AI with an entire personality and mind and all these other things, and every day you have to reenact a dead person.
There's that Black Mirror
That's
episode. There's that one Black Mirror
yes,
episode, right? Where she brings back her husband. And first he was
yeah,
just a chat bot, and then it became a voice bot. And then
yeah,
she upgraded to the deluxe humanoid, right? I mean,
yeah,
and I'm just thinking out loud now, like maybe a future conversation should be a panel discussion with you as a futurist and then some professional grief therapists,
yeah.
right? And then, maybe a digital attorney that can really talk about, what does it mean? I mean, even we're starting to evolve. I'm doing training right now with hospice professionals because they're social workers. They're in the human moment, but they are starting to see that the patient's dying with passwords, and
Yeah.
that is going to inhibit and prolong the bereavement process for the families.
Oh yeah.
Or now I'm starting. How about digital consent? Hey, dying mom, I'm gonna keep taking all these pictures of you, and oh, by the way, at your funeral,
Yep.
we're gonna upload all these pictures so everyone can see. And two children say, "Yes, I want that," and child says, "I don't want that. I don't want my mother's likeness out there." So
Yeah.
what is it? I mean, I feel like I've read a book about this maybe 20 years ago.
Oh, I'm sure there's been a book about it. I mean, and we're dealing with this because is this the decision of the person who's passing? I mean, one, I personally don't want my persona being used in that way because that seems so. I can see so many ways that that could be manipulated. I wish that we had a capability to have some more of these more mature conversations in the public and the civic spaces because this is the part that I do think legislation could be a part of it. I worry about the abuse of this, and there's so much, and there seems to be right now a major, for some reason, hands-off approach in our current, at least at the federal government, of hey, AI, whatever AI does, AI is 100% okay, just let it happen, and what other companies want. But the thing that, and the reason we originally wrote Soul in the Machine, I brought the authors together, was because I realized these questions of AI are raising, and they're literally writing the definitions of what soul is and what consciousness is. But it's happening in boardrooms with tech bros, with developers.
Like
And
probably.
I don't feel like, yeah, because they've got the money or they've got the tools, they have the ability to make these decisions, whether or not they realize that they're doing them, applying them to the rest of us. But it is because the AI tools are so ubiquitous now, we are finding them everywhere we go, and the definitions are going to begin to persuade and ultimately sway our own perceptions of ourselves. And I, my goal with the book was to kick the door down and say, hey, we need to be part of this conversation. And by the way, this isn't novel. We've been trying to discover this and discuss this since humanity began. And we're in a really odd
God,
place
it's such
right
weird
now.
times right now. And I'm curious again, as an author, I mean, I've been saying it's interesting how personally we don't want to talk about death and dying. I don't,
Yep.
people avoid it. But if a good book or movie doesn't have a good, like, good death or good dying or on the edge of someone perhaps losing their life, it's less intriguing, right? So
Yeah.
it's like we play both sides of the coin.
Yeah.
And yet, and I feel like, well, now with the technology, you might not have a choice.
Yeah. It is interesting that so many of our stories revolve around death. Yet, I think part of this is, and this is, I look and blame the world that I came out of. So much of our religious, and I would say the more fundamental Christianity, even though it is a religion that has death iconography, death symbolism at its core, the major act being crucifixion, yet for some reason, as that elements, has evolved here in the US, death became equated with evil at some point. That death became synonymous with sin and evil, often because the frontier preachers, that was their easiest way to go. They're all Jonathan Edwards in the hands, sinners in the hands of an angry God, and they pushed that. So what happened was you now have entire culture that seemingly is death opposed, as if we don't want to talk about death. We should push off thinking about it because even thinking about it might open yourself up to something. Let's not do that. And because of that, we've become very unable to cope. So much of death, and I applaud. I'm here in Denver, and the Day of the Dead celebrations in the Latin community is wonderful. We go down every year because I love that, where it becomes a celebration. We have these death imageries in front of us,
Right. I
and
think you have my our logo, our
yes,
mascot back
yes,
there, Jesse, right? So Jesse
yeah,
is that representation. Like it's a celebration. And let me just say that even the word thanatology, right, comes from the Greek word Thanos, which is the
yep,
Greek god of death. People don't realize like Than- Thanos, the Greek god of death, was kind of benevolent, or it was,
yes,
and yet Marvel Comics went ahead and created Thanos in the very evil sort of less,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's, and religion, church, what
yeah.
I,
You can see the influence of it very much. That, well, Thanos must be the villain in all this, and I'm a huge comic book fan. I believe these really are modern mythologies, and yet at the same time, there's so much identity switching,
mm,
and because of it, we fail to really explore these elements of what those figures were and why they were there. Yeah, Thanos in the myth was not seen as a enemy. He was a guide. He was a caretaker. He was the companion. So in that moment of
transition.
transition, you are
Oh, I
not
just got the
alone.
chills. It is, I mean, that's what it
Yeah.
was. He was just and he wasn't. It wasn't. I think they described it. He wasn't malevolent or benevolent. Like it was. It was
No.
just like there was a level of just. It just was.
Yes.
Where and I,
And that you needed someone to walk you through in that moment. That there is is the old concept of the psychopomp, the idea of leading us into the underworld, but we all have to have a guide. I look at the way that myth has evolved, and you see it in everything from the Odyssey. You see it to Aeneid. You see it even in Dante, where Dante conjures up the image of Virgil, who wrote the Aeneid. This great transition, that his passage into the underworld requires a guide that is comforting and loving. And it's a wonderful, interesting thing that we often, when we take that figure of Thanos mythologically, might throw a new name on him, but whoever is the person to greet the individual in fiction and bring them over the transition, usually they're a friendly face. And so it seems as if in our collective imagination, we understand that death does not have to be seen as this one stopgap, it's the end, but that we often view it as transition. And yet, seemingly, and this is the other thing that I think is also a challenge, uh, we have moved into a absolutely blinding acceptance not I'm a believer in science. I mean, that's just part of what I do. But of the also underlying philosophy that's been drug along with it of scientific materialism, this idea that what we have here, the physical world, and what is entirely measured by science, that is all there is. And I think that's actually caused a lot of pain and a lot of hurt because that creates a real sense of dread. The idea of oblivion, of just nothingness at the end. I've had my own moments of fear as I've thought of that. I've moved past that. I don't believe that anymore. But unfortunately, you're kind of left with, in this world right now, at least in the Western world, these two ideas. Either you accept that what happens at death is really rough and you go to either heaven or hell, or there's nothing there at all. And yet, I suspect there's probably a whole lot more to it than that.
And when I talk to children, and you'll see this book behind me, Everyone Dies.
Everyone
It's a
dies.
children's book. And when I'm working with parents and they're trying to explain, what death means, and I always, ask the child, well, where did you come from? And the child will look, because I had this conversation with my daughter when she was 11. She had this fear of death. And I said, well, where did you come from? She's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, before you were in my belly, like before you were growing inside of me, where were you? And she's like, 11-year-old, she really thought about it. She's like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, that's probably the place you're going back to because we don't know. And I'm pausing on that. We don't know. And yet, so what are your feelings about mediums?
Oh, it's interesting. I feel bad. The very first thought that comes to when you bring up mediums is so often the concept of charlatan. There's so much of that during the Victorian age, and yet there are people who have this sense of the dead. I've had moments in my own life
Oh,
where I'm convinced that I was not alone. I'm convinced that I've been in rooms that were empty, and I can promise you, they did not feel empty at all. Um, the experiences for me have been very long, where I feel very open to that world. That's not something I probably share publicly, but yeah. So I don't reject that in any way. In fact, I wish that was a part of our society that we could find to elevate, to applaud. Again, but mediums have also either they're seen as charlatans or they're seen as evil, and it's thus created this impasse where we feel like we're entirely cut off from the other side.
well,
And
my opinion about is, well, it's not my belief is that mediums are just like any other artisan, right? So you have a
yeah,
musician, you write books. It's like, where does that information come from? For them,
oh yeah,
their brains are just wired to pick up those frequencies on the other side. For them, it's conversations with people who've crossed. For others, it might be, an artist that sees a masterpiece on a blank canvas, or a story on pages of a book, and music on a score of music. Either way, the reason I was bringing up them is because I believe that they're just picking up on frequency. Frequency is energy. Energy can be measured. It's ones and zeros. It's just programming. And now I'm starting to see more mediums and ghost chasers that are actually using devices, technology,
yeah.
to be able to pick up those conversations of frequencies as well. I mean, what's Wi-Fi, right? I mean,
Hmm.
Wi-Fi is just like sound waves that are around us that we can't see. So why wouldn't that be any different? And here's the intersection. So take that experience, and now we're going to encapsulate it into technology to make it come to like fruition.
Yeah, yeah. My first mind actually the first thought that comes to my mind is, well, there's a science fiction story right there of, you know, what happens if some family goes ahead and creates the dead bot and they bake it into the house, and simultaneously
Wow.
the woman or the man who's died, their ghost is there, and they're like, well, wait a second, hold on, no, I'm the real one haunting you. I can see such confusion of like, going back and forth. And, the AI is very much convinced, no, I'm the right version of this. And like, there would be conflict in that moment. And But I love what you said about where does the artist come up with it, and it's true. That's if anyone has been a writer, an artist, it's impossible to not feel that there's something much larger, that spiritus mundi from which we draw. Because I have written things where I'm like, I don't know where that came from. That's not me. It is far bigger than me. At best, I was a vehicle, a usable vessel, and only for a moment. And so I can see why others would say yes. I mean, if I can tap into that much, much larger spirit of the world or the spirit of humanity, why can't the individual ones be tapped into? Yeah.
So let me ask you, you have children. So if something, young children, under 18, yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep, yep.
So what's your plan? Do you plan to make yourself a like today? What's your plan? Would you sign a consent for a digital consent for your family to replicate you?
No, I don't think so. I've thought about that long and hard. As a writer, part of what I've done is I've tried to, in a way, my books are my immortality project for me to hang on. I do believe that they say all that I need to have them say. At the same time, I reflect there's a great episode of Doctor Who, from the most recent Doctor, that they actually visit this planet that's had a great war and there's gravestones, and a young girl goes to visit her father's gravestone. What happens is a hologram appears of him, and it's an AI, and she has this conversation, and you see her deal with her grief. And I thought for a while, I'm like, if maybe it was at a location, maybe not to have it ubiquitously around, but where they would have to deal with the fact that, hey, I'm actually dead. Maybe I could see some value in it actually on a gravestone.
Jason,
Now
there's a
that
company that offers that right now.
see,
These
and,
are, I mean, they're
and for me that because that in my mind you can incorporate that into a ritual, and I do think that's the danger of all of this. One, we here in America have lost the power of ritual. Uh, Primarily because I mean, right now they say, what is it? One out of every three people in the U.S. are irreligious. So those rituals have gone by the wayside. But even then, we were losing it. We were losing rituals of movement from childhood to adulthood. Those great transitions weren't there. The amazing I believe it's Sarah Sagan, Carl Sagan's daughter. She wrote this real wonderful book, about potentially rituals for the agnostic and the atheist. And I think those are wonderful. But part of losing ritual means that we don't get to reenact these overall mythic stories that tie us to our path, remind us of who we were, and remind us of who we can be. And I worry about the collective soul of our society when we no longer have that ritual, those rituals to involve us in the greater story. And then now, when it comes to death, I think that these things would be a benefit to us if they could be incorporated ritually. If they are brought to us in convenience, like on a phone, a chat, ubiquitously across the house as a voice, that to me bothers me because then we are not processing properly what is happening in that moment with death. We are pushing that off. We are not allowing it to linger. So I do think some of this could have a benefit, but what I mean, we are just truly as a society ritually vacant, ritually inept, and it's a major problem because I do believe there's a soul sickness that begins to erupt when we don't have those processes to go through.
and for some people, they might be using these technology in order to create that, in order,
Yeah,
right, whether for resolve or for
yeah,
fantasy or for pure, they don't want to feel alone in the
yeah,
world. And then their
yeah.
one person who they depended on is gone. So why not? All right. So let me ask, what are three things, 2 to 3 things that our listeners can take away from your expertise as not just a futurist, but also as a philosopher?
I think both from futurist, from philosopher, from mythologist, part of it is, and with all of this, since we're talking AI, is actually finding ourselves spending time contemplatively thinking through death, which means you can't contemplatively think through it through a YouTube video and with your phone out. I encourage people, go to a graveyard, go actually
Volunteered
walk around.
hospice.
Yes, volunteer at hospice. Put your phone away and talk to people. It has to be something that we engage with. We wrap our arms around it, no matter how uncomfortable it makes us, because then only then can we actually explore it and integrate it. Doesn't mean you're going to have the answers, but you are going to become familiar with it, that you begin to see that in a way there is a real beauty to the transition moment. There is, and that's what I would hope people would come to, is first contemplate and then recognize that that moment has so much greater dimension than we have pushed it into, and we've shoved it into a corner and a crevice in our society. I'm not saying that isn't without grief, and yet at the same time, grief has its own magic. It has its own beauty because it speaks to so much depth of lived experience and what the potential is in other relationships. And so that would be the second thing, is recognize that death is far greater for those, a far greater potential experience for those who are still behind. And then to also keep open, maybe we don't know everything about the other side, and so don't conclude. I love being able to say, I hope it's this, but I don't know. And isn't it wonderful? That's the futurist in me. What if? What if there's even just a small minutia of us that transitions beyond this, that lives beyond this? What if? And that what if is a great instiller of hope and can move us through so many things. And I would say, I think that's the one thing so many of us have lost, is our ability to say what if. Einstein said imagination is more important than intelligence. Even as adults, for some reason we think we hit 25, our neuroplasticity ends, and
I don't believe that.
but it isn't.
I've learned more.
We have great, we have imaginations and minds, and to keep that going. And that's one of the reasons I do love science fiction, is I think it just reinstills us in that capability to imagine potential worlds, the stories about our future.
I knew that this conversation would go by fast, so I still feel like we should probably have a panel discussion to take a deeper dive with the different disciplinarians in order to really explore, like, what does this digital afterlife mean to us? What will it mean in the age of AI? So where people can find you if they wanted to engage?
People can find me, first of all, on my website, jbot.com. And yes, it's not going to be spelled the way you think, so it's jbatt.com. There you'll find out about my books, The Soul in the Machine, the other ones coming up. I am actually working on a book right now. I haven't found a publisher, but I am working on one based on the class on death in the age of AI. I've also got classes. I will be teaching several of them here over the next. One of the ones that I would encourage that I'm excited about is called The Lost Art of Wonder. And we will have a section in there about wonder and awe in the face of death. And I think that would be very applicable. So that's where I'd appoint people to, is jbot.com, jbatt.com.
Awesome. And with that, thank you so much for joining. And we'll end here.
Niki, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.